The wind howled through the empty parking lot of Route 34 Diner like a wounded animal, carrying with it the kind of cold that pierced straight through winter coats and settled deep into bones. Claire Matthews wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, her tired eyes drifting to the frost-covered windows where snowflakes swirled violently in the January darkness. At 32 years old, she'd worked the night shift at this roadside diner in Cedar Falls, Iowa for nearly 6 years, and she'd seen plenty of winter storms roll through the Midwest. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt dangerous. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their harsh glow over the empty vinyl booths and cracked linoleum floor. Claire glanced at the clock mounted above the kitchen pass-through. 11:47 p.m. Her shift wouldn't end until 6 in the morning, and according to the weather report crackling from the small radio near the coffee maker, the temperature had already dropped to -15 degrees, with wind chill pushing it closer to -30. The kind of cold that could kill someone in minutes if they weren't prepared. "You should head home early, Claire," called out Marcus Rodriguez, the night cook, from the kitchen. His weathered face appeared in the pass-through window, concern etched across his features. "Roads are going to be completely impassable soon. Nothing but you, me, and ghosts out here tonight anyway." Claire shook her head, her blonde ponytail swaying with the motion. "Can't afford to, Marcus. You know that." She managed a weak smile, though they both knew the truth behind those words. Every hour counted when you were a single mother trying to pay mounting medical bills. Her mother, Patricia, had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 8 months ago, and even with insurance, the costs were drowning them. Between that and raising her 8-year-old daughter Emma on a waitress's salary, Claire couldn't afford to lose a single shift, no matter how brutal the weather. Marcus sighed, disappearing back into the kitchen without another word. He understood. They'd had this conversation before. Claire returned to her routine, refilling salt shakers, folding napkins, checking the coffee pot, when the distant rumble of engines cut through the whistling wind. She looked up sharply, surprised. Who would be crazy enough to be out on the roads tonight, especially on motorcycles? The rumbling grew louder, and through the frost-covered windows, she could make out the approaching headlights. Not just 1 or 2, but at least a dozen motorcycles, their riders hunched against the brutal cold as they pulled into the parking lot. Claire watched as they dismounted, their movements stiff and slow from the freezing temperatures. Even from inside the diner, she could see they were struggling. The door burst open and a blast of Arctic air rushed in, along with 6 men wearing heavy leather jackets adorned with patches. The lead rider, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with a salt and pepper beard encrusted with ice, stamped his boots on the mat, his face red and raw from windburn. "Please tell me you're still open," he said, his voice hoarse, teeth chattering. "Of course," Claire said immediately, grabbing menus. "Come in, all of you. Get out of that cold." One by one, more riders filed in, 11 men and 2 women in total, all looking equally frozen and miserable. They shed their ice-covered gloves with numb fingers, their breath forming clouds in the warm diner air as their bodies began to thaw. The bearded man who'd entered first extended a shaking hand. "Name's Jack Donovan. We're part of the Heartland Warriors, a veterans motorcycle club out of Kansas City." He gestured to his companions. "We were riding back from a charity event in Des Moines when the weather turned. 3 of our bikes broke down about a mile back. Fuel lines frozen solid. We barely made it here." Claire's eyes widened. 3 bikes broke down? Are the riders okay?" "Cold, but they made it. Michael Chen and Robert Hayes doubled up with other riders, left the bikes on the shoulder, couldn't do much else." Jack's weathered face showed deep concern. "Ma'am, I've been riding for 30 years, and I've never seen it get this cold this fast. Weather report said it wasn't supposed to hit until tomorrow morning." "Sit down, all of you," Claire said, already moving into action. "Marcus, we need hot coffee, lots of it, and soup if we've got any ready." "On it," Marcus called back. Claire quickly pushed several tables together to accommodate the group. As they settled in, she noticed the patches on their jackets more clearly. Combat Veterans, Motorcycle Association, Purple Hearts, various military unit insignias. These weren't just any riders, they were men and women who'd served their country, now dedicated to helping other veterans through charity work. A younger rider, maybe early 30s with close-cropped dark hair, looked up at Claire with grateful eyes. "Thank you so much. I wasn't sure we were going to find anywhere open. I'm Daniel Foster, by the way. Army, 2 tours in Afghanistan." "Claire Matthews," she replied warmly, setting down mugs and beginning to pour steaming coffee. "And thank me when you're all warmed up. That cold out there is nothing to mess with." As she served coffee to each rider, she learned their names and stories. There was Linda Morrison, a Navy veteran and the club's treasurer, her hands still trembling from the cold. Gregory Thompson, a Marine who'd lost part of his hearing in Iraq but had the warmest smile. Robert Hayes, a soft-spoken Army medic who kept checking on the others, making sure everyone was okay. Michael Chen, an Air Force veteran whose fingers were so numb he could barely hold his coffee cup, and more, each with their own story of service and sacrifice. Marcus emerged from the kitchen carrying a large pot of chicken noodle soup and a basket of fresh rolls. "Made this fresh this afternoon," he said, ladling generous portions into bowls. "You folks eat up on the house." "Marcus, we can't," Claire started, but he cut her off with a look. "We can and we will," he said firmly. "These people served our country. Least we can do is make sure they don't freeze to death on Iowa back roads." Jack Donovan's eyes grew moist, and it wasn't from the cold anymore. "Sir, ma'am, we can't thank you enough. We've got money to pay." "Put your wallet away," Claire said gently but firmly. She thought of her own struggles, the bills piling up at home, the worry that kept her awake at night. But looking at these veterans, these people who'd given so much for others, she knew what the right thing to do was. Some things mattered more than money. Her mother had taught her that. As the riders ate and slowly warmed up, the diner filled with conversation and gradually returning spirits. Claire kept the coffee flowing and brought out extra blankets she kept in the back office for emergencies. Outside, the wind continued to scream and the snow fell harder, now coming down in thick, blinding sheets. Around 1 in the morning, Gregory Thompson tried his cell phone and shook his head. No signal. Storm must have taken out the towers. Jack stood and walked to the window, peering out into the white void. "We're not going anywhere tonight. Can't see 3 feet in front of my face out there, and even if the other bikes start, it'd be suicide to ride in this." Claire overhead and approached. "You can stay here. We've got booth seating and it's warm. Better than trying to find a motel in this mess, even if one's open." "We couldn't impose," Linda Morrison started, but Claire waved her off. "You're not imposing. You're surviving. There's a difference." She grabbed more blankets from the storage closet. "Make yourselves comfortable. I'll keep the coffee fresh." Daniel Foster caught Claire's arm gently as she passed. "Why are you doing this?" "You don't know us." Claire paused, thinking of Emma asleep at her grandmother's house across town, safe and warm. She thought of all the nights she'd struggled alone, and the few times strangers had shown her unexpected kindness that had made all the difference. "Because someone needs to," she said simply. "And tonight, that someone is me." As the night wore on, Claire learned more about the Heartland Warriors. They'd just come from a fundraiser that had collected over $50,000 for homeless veterans in Iowa. They did rides year-round, organizing toy drives for military families, visiting VA hospitals, and supporting veterans struggling with PTSD and homelessness. Every person in that diner had chosen to spend their free time helping others who'd worn the uniform. "We're riding to Chicago next week," Jack explained around 3 a.m., nursing his 6th cup of coffee. Big charity event. Proceeds go to building tiny home villages for homeless vets. It's become a real crisis, especially in the Midwest winters. Claire listened, fascinated and moved. That's incredible work you're doing. Robert Hayes, the former medic, smiled sadly. We lost too many brothers and sisters when they came home. If we can save even one person from freezing to death on the streets, all the riding is worth it. The words hit Claire hard. Here she was, struggling with her own problems, and these people dedicated their lives to helping others despite their own challenges. Gregory Thompson had told her he worked 2 jobs to support his disabled wife. Linda Morrison was a single mother of 3. Daniel Foster was going to college at night while working full-time. They all had their own burdens, yet they still found time to serve. Around 4:30 in the morning, Marcus made a full breakfast for everyone. Scrambled eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast. The smell filled the diner, and for a moment it felt less like a stranded group of strangers and more like a family gathering. As dawn began to break, pale and grey through the still falling snow, Jack Donovan stood and gathered his group. The storm's letting up a bit. We should try to get those bikes and see if we can get them running. Claire had barely slept, having spent the entire night making sure everyone was comfortable, warm and fed. Her feet ached, her eyes burned with exhaustion, but she'd never felt more awake. "Before we go," Jack said, turning to Claire and Marcus, "I need you both to know something. What you did tonight, opening your hearts to strangers, giving without expecting anything in return, that's rare, that's special." His voice grew thick with emotion. "We see a lot on the road. We see a lot of people who've forgotten how to care about their neighbors. You two reminded us that good people still exist." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. "You would have done the same for us." "Maybe," Linda Morrison said, stepping forward, "but you actually did it. That matters." The group gathered their belongings, donning their now dry gloves and preparing to face the cold again. Claire watched them file out, each one stopping to shake her hand or hug her, thanking her repeatedly. As the last rider headed for the door, Daniel Foster turned back. "Claire, can I ask you something personal?" She nodded, curious. "You've been on your feet all night. You look exhausted. Why didn't you take a break? Sit down for even a minute?" Claire smiled softly. "Because I know what it's like to need help and not get it. I know what it's like to feel invisible. I didn't want any of you to feel that way." Daniel studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as if committing something to memory. "You're a good person, Claire Matthews. Don't let the world convince you otherwise." Then they were gone. The rumble of motorcycle engines fading into the grey morning as they rode off to retrieve their broken-down bikes. Claire stood at the window, watching until the last taillight disappeared, feeling an odd mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. Marcus came to stand beside her. "That was something special what you did." "We did," Claire corrected. "You fed them, gave them soup and breakfast." "Yeah, but you gave them something more," Marcus said quietly. "You gave them dignity, respect. You treated them like they mattered." Claire didn't respond, just continued staring out at the snow-covered highway, unaware that the events of this single night would change her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of brilliant sunshine that only follows a major winter storm. Blinding white snow, reflecting light so bright it hurt to look at without squinting. Claire pulled her battered Honda Civic into the driveway of her mother's small ranch house on Maple Street, every muscle in her body screaming with fatigue. She'd worked a 12-hour shift instead of the usual 8, staying to help Marcus clean up and prep for the day crew before finally heading home at noon. The house was a modest 2-bedroom structure built in the 1970s, its vinyl siding showing its age and the roof in desperate need of repair. Claire made a mental note, as she did every time she came home, that they needed to fix that before next winter. But she knew they wouldn't. There was never enough money for the things that needed fixing. She found her daughter, Emma, at the kitchen table. Her dark curls bent over a coloring book, tongue poking out in concentration the way she always did when focused on something important. Patricia Matthews sat across from her, a colorful scarf wrapped around her head where her hair had been before the chemotherapy. Despite the illness that had ravaged her body, Patricia's smile was warm as she looked up at her daughter. "Mommy!" Emma jumped up and ran to Claire, wrapping her small arms around her waist. "Grandma said you had to stay at work because of the snow. Did you see the snow? It's so high." Claire hugged her daughter tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I did see it, baby. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?" "How was your night?" Patricia asked, her voice weak but steady. The treatments had taken so much from her, but she fought to stay present for her granddaughter, to be the support Claire desperately needed. Claire sank into a chair, suddenly overwhelmed with exhaustion. It was different. Good. Different. She proceeded to tell them about the stranded motorcycle riders, the Veterans Club, and the long night of keeping them warm and fed. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, honey, that's exactly the kind of person you are. Your father would be so proud." Claire's father, Thomas Matthews, had been a volunteer firefighter who died in a barn fire when Claire was 16, trying to save horses trapped inside. He taught her that service to others was the highest calling, that you measured your life not by what you accumulated, but by what you gave away. It was a lesson that had shaped her entire existence, even when it meant sacrificing her own comfort. "Were they nice, the motorcycle people?" Emma asked, returning to her coloring, but looking up with wide, curious eyes. "Very nice," Claire said, smiling. "They're heroes, actually. They served in the military to protect our country, and now they help other veterans who need support." "Like Grandpa was a hero," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Exactly like that," Patricia confirmed, reaching over to stroke Emma's hair. The rest of Sunday passed quietly. Claire slept for a few hours, helped Emma with homework, made dinner, and tried not to think about the stack of medical bills on her desk in the bedroom. The latest statement from the hospital showed they owed nearly $78,000, even after insurance. The number was so large it felt abstract, impossible. How did anyone pay that back on a waitress's salary? She'd picked up every extra shift she could, but it never seemed like enough. Her tips varied wildly. Sometimes she'd make $200 on a weekend night, other times barely $50. The diner wasn't exactly fine dining, and their clientele were mostly truckers and travelers who were watching their own budgets carefully. That night, after tucking Emma into bed with 3 stories and too many kisses to count, Claire sat with her mother in the living room, the television playing softly in the background. "I got another call from the collection agency," Patricia said quietly. "I told them to stop calling, that we're paying what we can." Claire's chest tightened. "Mom, you shouldn't have to deal with that. I told you I'll handle the bills." "They're my bills, honey, my treatment, my disease. I hate that this is falling on you." "Don't," Claire said sharply, then softened her tone. "Don't do that. You're my mother. This is what family does. We take care of each other." Patricia reached over and squeezed Claire's hand, her grip weaker than it used to be. "You're so much like your father. Too much sometimes. You give and give until there's nothing left for yourself." Claire wanted to argue, but she was too tired. Instead, she just sat there, holding her mother's hand, listening to the old house settle and creak around them, wondering how they were going to make it through another month. Monday morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp January day that made everything look clean and new, despite the problems lurking beneath the surface. Claire dropped Emma at Cedar Falls Elementary School, watching her daughter skip through the snow toward the building, carefree in the way only children could be. She wished she could bottle that feeling, remember what it was like to not carry the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her shift at the diner started at 10 a.m. Marcus was already there when she arrived, prepping the kitchen for the lunch rush that would inevitably come. Farmers and business people from town, the usual Monday crowd. "You hear anything from those bikers?" Marcus asked as Claire tied on her apron. "No, I didn't expect to," Claire replied, checking that the coffee machines were full and ready. "They were just passing through. I'm sure they've got 100 other towns and 1,000 other people to help." Still, would have been nice to know they made it okay. Claire agreed but didn't dwell on it. That was the nature of her job. People came through, you served them, they left. Most of the time, you never knew what happened to them after they walked out the door. It was better not to wonder too much. You'd drive yourself crazy. The morning passed in its usual rhythm. Coffee poured, orders taken, plates delivered, small talk with regulars. Mrs. Henderson came in at 10:30, like she did every Monday, ordering the same thing she'd ordered for 20 years. 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and black coffee. Mr. Patterson from the hardware store sat at the counter reading the Cedar Falls Gazette, muttering about property taxes and city council decisions. It was ordinary, routine, exactly what Claire needed after the unusual events of Saturday night. Then around 11:15 a.m., Claire heard it, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines growing louder. She looked up from the coffee pot, curious. Through the window, she could see them coming down Route 34. But this time, there weren't just a dozen bikes. There were hundreds. The rumbling grew deafening as motorcycle after motorcycle pulled into the diner's parking lot and then onto the street in front of it. Claire stepped outside, Marcus right behind her, watching in absolute disbelief as the motorcycles kept coming, filling the parking lot, lining both sides of the street, stretching as far as she could see in both directions. Riders dismounted, all wearing leather jackets with various patches. Combat veterans, Motorcycle Association, Patriot Guard riders, Rolling Thunder, and dozens of other veteran motorcycle clubs from across the Midwest. They came from Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, even as far as Michigan and Wisconsin. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. What? What is this?" Jack Donovan emerged from the crowd, his weathered face split in a huge grin. Behind him came Daniel Foster, Linda Morrison, Gregory Thompson, Robert Hayes, Michael Chen, and all the others from Saturday night. "Claire Matthews," Jack said, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "We came back to say thank you properly." Claire shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. What's happening?" Daniel stepped forward. "After we left here Saturday morning, I couldn't stop thinking about you, about what you did for us, so I made some calls." He gestured to the massive crowd of bikers, now numbering well over 300. "We all made calls, to every veteran motorcycle club in the region. We started asking questions," Linda Morrison continued. "Talked to people in town. Found out about your mother, her cancer. Found out about your bills, your struggles. Found out you're working yourself to death trying to take care of everyone but yourself," Gregory Thompson added gently. Claire felt tears streaming down her face. You didn't have to do this." "Yes, we did," Jack said firmly, "because Saturday night, when we were frozen and stranded and scared, you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask what we could pay. You didn't check our credentials or our bank accounts. You just helped because it was the right thing to do." Robert Hayes, the former medic, stepped forward carrying a large box. "We took up a collection. Every club here contributed. Individual donations from riders all across the Midwest." He handed Claire the box, and when she opened it, she saw it was filled with checks, cash, and money orders. "There's $43,000 in there," Robert said quietly. "It's not everything you need, but it's a start." Claire's knees went weak and Marcus had to steady her. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "You can and you will," Jack said, "but that's not all." He gestured, and more riders came forward. A woman in her 40s with short grey hair stepped up. "I'm Jennifer Walsh, and I own Walsh Automotive in Waterloo." I heard your car's been having trouble. Bring it by this week. We'll fix everything for free, parts and labor. A tall man with kind eyes approached next. Thomas Burke, I'm a contractor. Your mother's roof needs replacing. My crew and I will do it, no charge. Materials are donated by Riverside Building Supply. One by one, people stepped forward. Business owners, contractors, medical professionals, all members or supporters of veteran motorcycle clubs, all offering services. Free dental work for Emma, groceries for 3 months, a pledge to pay the utility bills through the end of winter. But the most stunning moment came when a woman in a white coat stepped forward. Dr. Samantha Price, oncologist from Iowa City Hospital. I've reviewed your mother's case and I've arranged for her to be transferred to our cancer center. We've got access to newer treatments, clinical trials that insurance doesn't cover. We're going to take care of her, Claire. No cost to you. Claire collapsed into sobs, unable to process the magnitude of what was happening. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, crying himself. Why? Claire managed to choke out. Why would you do all this? Daniel Foster knelt down so he was eye level with her. Because you reminded us what we're fighting for. We ride all over this country, raising money, helping veterans, trying to make a difference. But sometimes we forget that kindness doesn't just flow one direction. Sometimes we forget that civilians like you are the reason we served in the first place, to protect good people who make this country worth defending. You gave us warmth when we were freezing, Linda Morrison said. You gave us food when we were hungry. You gave us dignity when we felt vulnerable. That's worth more than money could ever buy. Jack Donovan raised his voice to address the crowd. Claire Matthews represents everything we believe in: service, sacrifice, putting others before yourself. Today, we're honoring that. Today, we're showing her that kindness creates a ripple effect. The crowd of motorcyclists erupted in cheers, their voices echoing down the small town street. Residents of Cedar Falls had begun to gather, drawn by the noise and the spectacle of hundreds of motorcycles filling their quiet town. Mayor Susan Caldwell pushed through the crowd, her face showing shock and then understanding as she took in the scene. She approached Claire, who was still sobbing in Marcus's arms. Claire, the mayor said gently, these people have told me what you did. What you've been doing, actually. Taking care of your mother, raising your daughter alone, working impossible hours, and still finding time to help strangers. This town should have been helping you all along. She turned to address the growing crowd of townspeople. We talk a lot about community values in Cedar Falls, about being neighbors, about supporting each other. But sometimes we get so caught up in our own lives that we forget to actually look around and see who needs help. These veterans, these strangers from out of town, they're showing us what community really means. The crowd murmured, some people looking ashamed, others nodding in agreement. Claire finally managed to stand, wiping her eyes, though the tears kept flowing. I don't know what to say. Thank you seems so inadequate. Then don't say anything, Jack replied. Just accept the help. Let people care for you the way you care for others. The rest of the day was a blur. Local news crews arrived, cameras rolling as they captured the story of the Waitress, who helped stranded veterans, and the massive outpouring of support that followed. The riders didn't leave. They stayed, creating an impromptu festival in the streets of Cedar Falls. Someone brought speakers and played music. Food trucks appeared, their owners donating their proceeds to Claire's fund. Emma was brought from school by Patricia, both of them staring in wonder at the scene. Emma ran to her mother, and Claire scooped her up, holding her tight. "Mommy, what's happening?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. "Something wonderful, baby," Claire whispered. "Something I never expected." Patricia approached the group of veterans, tears streaming down her thin face. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for seeing my daughter, for recognizing her heart." Linda Morrison hugged her gently. "Your daughter saved us from freezing. Now we're going to help save you." As the sun began to set on that extraordinary Monday, casting long shadows across the snow-covered street, Claire stood surrounded by hundreds of people she'd never met before, people who'd traveled hundreds of miles just to say thank you, just to help, just to prove that goodness still existed in the world. And for the first time in years, Claire Matthews allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. The story of the Cedar Falls waitress and the veteran bikers exploded across social media within hours. By Tuesday morning, the video of hundreds of motorcycles lining the small town street had been viewed over 2 million times. News outlets from Chicago, Des Moines, and even national networks were calling, requesting interviews. Claire sat in her mother's living room, staring at her phone in disbelief as notification after notification pinged. Friend requests from strangers, messages of support, offers of additional help. It was overwhelming. "Mom, you're famous," Emma declared, watching a news segment on the television where a reporter stood in front of the Route 34 diner recounting Saturday night's events. "I'm not famous, honey. I just did what anyone would do," Claire said. Though even as she spoke the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. Not everyone would have done what she did. That was part of the problem in the world. People had become so focused on their own struggles that they'd forgotten to look up and see the struggles of others. Patricia sat in her favorite armchair, the one by the window that caught the afternoon sun, looking stronger somehow despite her illness. "You need to embrace this, Claire. Not for the attention, but for what it represents." "What do you mean?" "This story, what happened, it's giving people hope. In a world that feels increasingly divided and harsh, you reminded everyone that kindness still exists. That's powerful, honey. That changes things." A knock at the door interrupted them. Claire opened it to find Daniel Foster standing on the porch, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" He smiled sheepishly. "I know this might seem strange, but I wanted to check on you. Make sure you are handling all this attention okay. It can be a lot." Claire invited him in, offering coffee, which he accepted. They sat at the kitchen table while Emma played in the living room and Patricia rested. "I'm not really handling it," Claire admitted. "I mean, I'm grateful, more grateful than I can express, but it feels surreal. Yesterday morning I was worried about paying the electric bill, and now there's money for my mom's treatment. My car's getting fixed, the roof's being replaced. It's like I'm dreaming." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I felt the same way when I came home from Afghanistan. Everything changed so fast, and I didn't know how to process it. But here's what I learned. Sometimes you just have to accept that good things can happen, that you deserve good things." "Do I, though?" Claire asked quietly. "I mean, I just gave some people coffee and soup. That's my job. I don't understand why it warranted all of this." "That's exactly why it did," Daniel said, leaning forward. "Because you don't see it as anything special. You just saw people who needed help and you helped them. No fanfare, no expectation of reward. That's become rare, Claire." Over the next few days, Claire's life transformed in ways both wonderful and strange. The diner became a tourist attraction, with people driving from surrounding towns just to eat there and meet the Angel Waitress, as some media outlets had dubbed her. Marcus had to hire 2 additional servers just to handle the increased traffic, and Claire found herself working longer hours than ever, though now her tip jar overflowed daily. Local businesses started a Claire Matthews Day promotion, pledging a percentage of their Tuesday earnings to a scholarship fund that had been established for Emma's future education. The Cedar Falls Community Center organized a benefit dinner, with all proceeds going to help other families struggling with medical debt. But perhaps the most significant change came from within Claire herself. For years, she'd carried her burdens alone, believing that asking for help was a weakness, that true strength meant suffering in silence. The outpouring of support forced her to reconsider that belief. On Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after the night she'd helped the stranded riders, Claire attended a town hall meeting that Mayor Susan Caldwell had organized. The Cedar Falls High School gymnasium was packed with residents, veteran motorcycle club members who'd stayed in town, and media representatives. Mayor Caldwell opened the meeting with a frank admission. "The events of this past week have shown all of us, that we've failed as a community. We have a neighbor, a fellow citizen who's been struggling right under our noses, and we did nothing." Some residents shifted uncomfortably, but the mayor pressed on. Claire Matthews has worked at the Route 34 diner for 6 years. Many of us have been served by her, have seen her friendly smile, have benefited from her excellent service. How many of us knew about her mother's cancer? How many knew she was a single mother, working 60-hour weeks, drowning in medical debt? The gymnasium fell silent. We didn't know because we didn't ask. We didn't look. We became a town of individuals instead of a community. The mayor's voice grew stronger. But that changes now. The Heartland Warriors and the other veteran clubs showed us what community looks like. They showed us that caring for each other isn't just about the people we know. It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone. Jack Donovan stood and was handed a microphone. "We didn't come here to shame anyone. We came to honor Claire and to start a movement. Every small town in America has people like Claire, good people who are struggling, who are one emergency away from losing everything. We want to change that." He explained the initiative the veteran clubs were launching, the Roadside Angels Project, a nationwide effort to identify and support individuals who exemplified selfless service to others. Cedar Falls would be the pilot program, with veteran riders partnering with local businesses and residents to create a support network for families in crisis. "We're not talking about handouts," Jack clarified. "We're talking about community support. Job training programs, affordable childcare, medical bill negotiation assistance, mental health services, the infrastructure to help people help themselves." Linda Morrison took the microphone next. "Claire's story touched us because she didn't have to help us. She could have turned us away, could have said it wasn't her problem. Instead, she chose compassion. We're asking this community, this entire country, to make that same choice." The gymnasium erupted in applause. Claire sat in the front row, overwhelmed again by tears, by the magnitude of what her simple act of kindness had sparked. After the meeting, dozens of people approached her. Some apologized for not noticing her struggles. Others shared their own stories of hardship, of feeling invisible and forgotten. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who ordered the same breakfast every Monday, pressed a check into Claire's hand. "It's $5,000, Mrs. Henderson said, her watery eyes fierce. "My late husband left me well provided for. I don't need it all, but you do. More importantly, this town needs to remember what it means to take care of its own." A young couple approached nervously. "We're the Carsons, David and Michelle. We just moved here last year. We don't have much money, but we can offer babysitting. Anytime you need someone to watch Emma, just call us." Tom Burke, the contractor who'd promised to fix the roof, brought forward 3 other business owners. "We're forming a coalition, Cedar Falls Cares. Any resident facing a crisis can apply for support. No one should have to choose between medical treatment and keeping the lights on." Dr. Samantha Price, the oncologist, approached with another doctor. "This is Dr. James Liu, a financial counselor specializing in medical debt. He's volunteered to work with anyone in Cedar Falls dealing with medical bills. We're going to help people navigate the system, fight unfair charges, set up payment plans that won't destroy them financially." The initiatives kept coming. The local church announced a community meal program. The high school started a volunteer network for yard work and home repairs for elderly residents and struggling families. The library created a resource center for job seekers and people needing social services. Claire watched it all unfold, amazed that one cold Saturday night had catalyzed so much change. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and Patricia had retired to her room, Claire sat on the back porch, despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and staring at the stars. She heard the door open and turned to see Daniel Foster stepping out to join her. "Hope you don't mind," he said. "Saw you come out here and thought you might want company." "I don't mind," Claire said honestly. Over the past week, Daniel had become a fixture in her life, checking in daily, helping field media requests, running interference when the attention became too much. She'd learned more about him, that he was studying engineering at Iowa State, that he worked construction to pay for school, that he'd lost his best friend in Afghanistan and carried that grief like a stone in his chest. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Daniel asked, settling into the chair beside her. "I'm thinking about how strange life is," Claire said. "A week ago I was invisible. Just another struggling waitress in a small town, no one special. Now I'm on the news. People are calling me an angel, and entire systems are changing because of one night." "You were never invisible, Claire. You were just unseen. There's a difference." She considered this. "I guess I'm wondering what happens when the attention fades, when the news crews leave and people move on to the next story. Will all these promises still matter?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. "That's up to the community. But here's what I believe. You didn't just help 13 cold bikers on a winter night. You reminded an entire town of who they want to be. You held up a mirror, and people didn't like what they saw, a community that had stopped caring, that had become complacent. That kind of awakening doesn't just fade. I hope you're right." "I am," Daniel said confidently, "because I've seen what happens when good people decide to act. I've seen it in the military, in the veteran community, and now I'm seeing it here. Change is possible, Claire. You're the proof." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the quiet sounds of the winter night. After a while, Daniel spoke again, his voice softer. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. When I came home from Afghanistan, I was lost. I had survivor's guilt, PTSD, no direction. The Veteran Motorcycle Club saved my life, gave me purpose, brotherhood, a way to turn my pain into something positive." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "Meeting you reminded me why that work matters. You're what we're protecting, Claire. Not some abstract concept of freedom, but actual people with good hearts who make the world better just by existing in it." Claire felt her breath catch. "Daniel, I'm not saying this to make you uncomfortable," he continued quickly. "I just want you to know that you changed me too, made me believe again that there are people worth fighting for." They locked eyes in the dim porch light, and Claire felt something shift inside her. The first stirrings of something she hadn't felt in years, hadn't allowed herself to feel since Emma's father left when she was pregnant. Hope. Not just for financial stability or her mother's health, but for herself. For the possibility of connection, of not being alone. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for caring." "Thank you for showing me what caring really looks like," Daniel replied. Inside the house, the phone rang, probably another media request, but Claire didn't move to answer it. For this moment, she just sat with Daniel under the stars, allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life was becoming something more than mere survival. 3 weeks after the motorcycles first lined Cedar Falls streets, the transformation of the small Iowa town was remarkable. What had started as a tribute to one waitress's kindness had evolved into a comprehensive community revitalization effort. The Cedar Falls Cares Coalition, initially formed by a handful of business owners, now included over 75 members. Everyone from shop owners to farmers to teachers. They'd established a community fund with over $200,000 in donations, and they'd already helped 12 families facing various crises, medical emergencies, job losses, house fires. Claire watched these developments with a mixture of pride and disbelief. She still worked at the Route 34 diner, though Marcus had insisted on promoting her to manager with a significant pay raise. The diner's business had tripled, necessitating an expansion that local contractors completed at cost. But the changes extended far beyond economics. Something fundamental had shifted in Cedar Falls culture. On a cold Saturday morning in early February, Claire attended the grand opening of the Cedar Falls Community Resource Center, housed in a renovated storefront on Main Street that had been empty for 5 years. The space now contained a food pantry, a job training center, a medical bill advocacy office, and meeting rooms for support groups. Mayor Caldwell cut the ribbon to enthusiastic applause from the crowd of over 300 residents. This center represents the best of who we are and who we want to be. It exists because one woman showed us that kindness isn't complicated. It's simply choosing to see each other and respond with compassion. Claire stood beside her mother, who looked healthier than she had in months. Dr. Price's treatment plan was working, the tumors were shrinking, and Patricia's energy was returning. Emma held her grandmother's hand, swinging it happily, her innocent joy a reminder of what was truly important. After the ceremony, Claire was approached by a nervous-looking woman in her mid-20s, carrying a toddler on her hip. "Miss Matthews, I'm Jennifer Wu. I wanted to thank you. Please call me Claire." "Thank me for what?" Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "My husband died 6 months ago. Car accident. I've been drowning, couldn't afford childcare, couldn't work, was about to lose our apartment. I heard about Cedar Falls Cares and applied, thinking nothing would come of it. But they helped me, found me affordable childcare, enrolled me in a job training program, negotiated with my landlord. I start work as a medical billing specialist next week. You did that. You started all of this." Claire hugged her, feeling the young mother's body shake with grateful sobs. "I'm so glad you got the help you needed. That's what community should be." "It's more than help," Jennifer said fiercely. "It's dignity, it's hope, it's people finally seeing me as a human being instead of a problem to ignore." Those words stayed with Claire throughout the day. That's what had been missing, she realized, not just in Cedar Falls, but everywhere. People had stopped seeing each other as human beings worthy of care and had started viewing everyone through the lens of transaction. "What can you do for me? What's the benefit to helping you?" That evening, the Heartland Warriors hosted a benefit dinner at the community center to support the Roadside Angels project, which was now expanding to 15 cities across the Midwest. Over 400 people attended, including representatives from veteran groups, local politicians, media, and regular citizens. Jack Donovan took the stage, his commanding presence filling the room. 5 weeks ago, 13 cold and scared bikers stumbled into a diner, and one woman with very little chose to give us everything she could. That act of grace sparked something we never expected: a movement. He gestured to a large screen behind him, which showed photos and videos from other towns where the Roadside Angels project had launched. In Springfield, Illinois, a retired teacher who volunteered at a homeless shelter was honored with home repairs and a new car. In Omaha, Nebraska, a single father who worked 3 jobs to support his disabled son received childcare assistance and medical equipment donations. In Peoria, a veteran who'd been secretly paying for groceries for struggling families in his neighborhood was surprised with funds to continue and expand his work. "These are the real heroes," Jack continued. "Not the people who make grand gestures for cameras, but the quiet warriors who serve their communities every single day without recognition." The Roadside Angels project exists to find these people and ensure they're not carrying their burdens alone. Linda Morrison joined him on stage. We've also partnered with mental health organizations to provide counseling and support services in every town we work in. Because we've learned that financial help is only part of the equation. People need emotional support too. They need to know they matter, that they're valued, that they're not fighting alone. The dinner raised over $50,000 with commitments for monthly recurring donations from businesses and individuals across the region. But more valuable than the money was the network forming. People from different towns sharing ideas, collaborating on solutions, creating a web of support that transcended geographic boundaries. After dinner, Daniel found Claire in a quiet corner, looking thoughtful. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just overwhelmed. In a good way, mostly. I keep thinking about all the people this is helping, and I'm grateful. But I also wonder about all the people we're not reaching, you know? All the Jennifer Woos out there who don't know help is available. That's why the work continues," Daniel said gently. "You can't save everyone, Claire, but you can create systems that save more people than would have been saved otherwise. That's not nothing. I know, it just feels like there's so much need." Daniel took her hand, and she didn't pull away. Over the past weeks, their friendship had deepened into something neither of them had quite named yet, but both felt growing. He understood her in ways most people didn't, understood the weight of responsibility, the need to serve, the guilt of accepting help. "Can I show you something?" Daniel asked. He led her outside, where several motorcycles were parked. He swung his leg over one, a beautiful black and chrome Harley, and handed Claire a helmet. "Have you ever ridden?" She shook her head nervously. "Trust me," he asked, extending his hand. Claire looked back at the community center, warm and bright with laughter and music. She thought about Emma, safe with her grandmother. She thought about all the responsibilities and worries that usually consumed her thoughts. And then she made a choice, the same choice she'd been making more often lately, to accept help, to trust, to believe that she deserved moments of joy. "Yes," she said, taking his hand and climbing onto the motorcycle behind him. They rode through the quiet streets of Cedar Falls, the cold air sharp against her face, despite the helmet, the vibration of the engine thrumming through her body. Daniel took them out onto country roads, past snow-covered farms and frozen fields lit silver by the full moon. Claire wrapped her arms around Daniel's waist and leaned into the ride, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not the freedom of having no responsibilities, those would always be there, but the freedom of knowing she could carry those responsibilities without being crushed by them, because she wasn't alone anymore. When they finally returned to the community center, Claire was laughing, windblown and exhilarated. "That was incredible," she exclaimed as she dismounted. Daniel grinned. "Thought you might like it. Sometimes you need to step away from everything to remember why you're fighting for it." They stood close in the parking lot, breath forming clouds between them. The moment stretched, charged with possibility. "Claire, Daniel started, but was interrupted by Emma running out of the community center, Patricia following more slowly behind. "Mommy, you were on a motorcycle! That's so cool!" Claire scooped up her daughter, spinning her around. "It was pretty cool, wasn't it?" Patricia smiled knowingly at Daniel, who ducked his head, embarrassed at the interrupted moment. But Claire caught his eye over Emma's shoulder and mouthed, "Later," a promise that made his face light up. As they all headed back inside together, Claire and Emma, Patricia, Daniel, and the growing family of people who'd come into their lives through an act of simple kindness, Claire felt something settle in her chest. Peace, gratitude, hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Patricia's treatment would continue for months. Bills would still need to be paid. Life would throw its inevitable challenges. But Claire knew now that she didn't have to face those challenges alone, that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. and that the ripples from one small act of kindness could change entire communities. And maybe, just maybe, change the world. Spring came to Cedar Falls with the tentative hope of new beginnings. The snow melted, revealing the brown grass beneath, and the first crocuses pushed through the thawing earth in defiant splashes of purple and white. The town that had been transformed by winter's harsh lessons now prepared to bloom. It was late March when Dr. Samantha Price called Claire with the news they'd all been praying for. Claire was at the diner taking inventory when her phone rang. "Claire, I wanted to tell you in person, but I can't wait. Your mother's latest scans are clear. Completely clear. The tumors are gone." Claire's hands started shaking so badly she had to sit down. "Clear? You mean..." "I mean, she's in remission. We'll continue monitoring, of course, but all signs indicate the treatment was successful. Your mother beat cancer, Claire." The phone slipped from Claire's hand as she dissolved into tears. Marcus rushed over, alarmed, and when she managed to gasp out the news, he started crying too. Within minutes, the entire diner staff was hugging and celebrating, and customers who'd overheard were clapping and crying along with them. That afternoon, when Claire picked up Emma from school and drove to her mother's house to share the news in person, Patricia was already waiting on the porch, Dr. Price having called her as well. Mother and daughter collapsed into each other's arms, years of fear and worry finally releasing in great, gasping sobs of relief and joy. "We did it, Mum," Claire whispered. "You beat it." "We did it together," Patricia corrected, holding her daughter's face in her hands. "You never gave up on me, never stopped fighting." Emma danced around them both, not fully understanding the medical details, but understanding perfectly that something wonderful had happened, that the shadow that had hung over their family was finally lifting. That evening, Daniel arrived with the entire Heartland Warriors crew, Jack, Linda, Gregory, Robert, Michael, and dozens of others who'd become like family over the past months. They'd brought food, flowers, and champagne to celebrate Patricia's remission. "To Patricia Matthews," Jack toasted, raising his glass, "a warrior who fought cancer with the same grace and courage her daughter showed us on that cold winter night. You come from strong stock, Claire." "To second chances," Linda added. "And to the community that rallied to make this moment possible." As they celebrated, Claire looked around her mother's small living room, packed with people who'd been strangers just months ago. Daniel stood close to her, his hand finding hers naturally now, their relationship having evolved from friendship to something deeper and more meaningful. Emma sat on Jack's lap, giggling as the gruff biker told her exaggerated stories about his motorcycle adventures. Patricia glowed with health and happiness, surrounded by people who'd fought for her survival as fiercely as they'd fought for their country. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Daniel called out, and the room quieted. He looked at Claire, his expression nervous but determined. "I have an announcement, and I wanted to make it here, surrounded by family." Claire's heart started racing. "Daniel," he took both her hands in his. "Claire Matthews, meeting you changed my life. You showed me what real courage looks like, not the kind you display in combat, but the everyday courage of showing up, of caring for others, of choosing compassion even when you're struggling yourself. I've spent the last 4 months falling in love with you, with your daughter, with your mother, with the beautiful heart you possess." Claire felt tears streaming down her face. "Daniel..." "I'm not done," he said, smiling. "I know this might seem fast, and I'm not asking you to decide anything right now, but I want you to know my intentions. I'm in this for the long haul. I want to be part of your life, part of Emma's life. I want to help carry the burdens you've carried alone for too long. And when you're ready, no pressure, no timeline, I want to marry you." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Emma shrieked with delight, jumping up and down. Patricia was crying happy tears, and the bikers were whistling and hollering their approval. Claire couldn't speak. She simply pulled Daniel to her and kissed him, pouring every ounce of gratitude, love, and hope she felt into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "Yes, whenever you're ready, the answer is yes." More cheers, more celebration, more joy than Claire had ever imagined possible. 2 months later, on a perfect May afternoon, when the Iowa countryside was dressed in brilliant green and the apple trees were blooming, Cedar Falls hosted its first annual Community Appreciation Day. The entire downtown area was closed to traffic, filled instead with booths, food vendors, live music, and hundreds of motorcycles lining the streets in an echo of that transformative February day. The Roadside Angels project had grown beyond anyone's expectations. It now operated in 43 cities across 12 states, had helped over 200 families, and had inspired similar initiatives in communities nationwide. The Cedar Falls model, combining veteran motorcycle clubs with local business coalitions and community volunteers, had proven remarkably effective at identifying and supporting people in crisis. Claire stood on the stage erected in front of the courthouse, looking out at the massive crowd. She'd been asked to give a speech, something she still found terrifying despite all the media attention of recent months. 6 months ago, she began, her voice shaking slightly, I was invisible, not because I was hidden, but because people had stopped looking at each other. We'd become a society of individuals, each struggling alone, each assuming everyone else was fine because we didn't ask. Then 13 cold bikers walked into a diner and everything changed. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Emma stood with Patricia and Daniel at the side of the stage, all three of them beaming with pride. I didn't do anything extraordinary that night. I just did what my father taught me. See people, recognize their humanity, and respond with compassion. But that simple act sparked something none of us expected. It reminded a community of who they wanted to be. It created connections that transcended the original gesture. She gestured to the crowd. Look around. 6 months ago, how many of us knew our neighbors? How many of us were aware of the struggles happening right next door? How many of us would have stepped up to help if we'd known? Heads nodded throughout the crowd, people looking at each other with new understanding. The real miracle wasn't what happened to me and my family, though I'm grateful beyond words for that. The real miracle is what happened to this community. We remembered that we're stronger together. We remembered that caring for each other isn't a burden, it's what gives our lives meaning. Jack Donovan joined her on stage. Claire's right. The Roadside Angels project exists because we believe in the power of community, in the idea that no one should have to struggle alone. But this isn't just about veteran bikers swooping in to save the day. It's about building sustainable networks of support in every town, every neighborhood. Linda Morrison stepped up with a microphone. Today, we're announcing the next phase of the project. We're launching the Community Champion Program, which will train volunteers in every participating city to identify people in crisis and connect them with resources. We're partnering with social services, healthcare providers, businesses, and faith communities to create comprehensive support systems. Mayor Caldwell took the microphone next. Cedar Falls is committing to making this permanent. The Community Resource Center isn't a temporary project. It's a fundamental part of our town's infrastructure now. We're hiring a full-time director and staff. We're allocating budget funds. We're making a promise that no resident of this town will ever have to face crisis alone again. The crowd erupted in applause. As the speeches concluded and the festival began in earnest, Claire wandered through the booths with Daniel, Emma skipping ahead of them. She stopped at the Cedar Falls Cares booth, where Jennifer Wu, the young widow Claire had met at the Resource Center opening, was volunteering. "Jennifer, how are you doing?" Jennifer's face lit up. "Claire, I'm amazing. Started my new job 2 months ago, and I just moved into a bigger apartment. Things are really coming together." She gestured to the booth. "I wanted to volunteer because I remember what it felt like to need help. Now I want to be the one offering it." "That's the whole point," Claire said, squeezing her hand. "We lift each other up." Throughout the day, Claire encountered similar stories. The high school student who'd received a scholarship from the community fund and would be the first in his family to attend college. The elderly veteran who'd been facing homelessness until Cedar Falls Cares connected him with affordable housing and medical care. The single father who'd lost his job and was now employed by one of the coalition businesses, with his childcare covered by community volunteers. Each story was a testament to what was possible when people chose to see each other, to care, to act. As evening approached, the festival culminated in a massive benefit ride. Over 500 motorcycles participated, riding through Cedar Falls and the surrounding countryside in a show of solidarity and support. Claire rode with Daniel, Emma safe in a sidecar that Jack had specially modified, wearing a tiny helmet and grinning from ear to ear. The procession was magnificent, chrome gleaming in the golden afternoon light, engines rumbling in harmony, flags flying from many of the bikes. They rode past the diner where it all began, past the community center, past the hospital where Patricia had received her life-saving treatment, past the school where Emma learned and grew, past all the places that made Cedar Falls home. When they returned to the downtown staging area, Patricia was waiting, healthy and strong, tears streaming down her face at the sight of her daughter and granddaughter on the motorcycle. "Your father would be so proud," she told Claire, embracing her tightly. "You've created something beautiful here, something lasting." That night, after Emma was asleep and the town had quieted, Claire sat on her back porch with Daniel, wrapped in blankets against the cool spring air. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the sound of distant motorcycles occasionally rumbled through the darkness. "Can you believe where we are?" Claire asked softly. 6 months ago, I was drowning. I couldn't see any way forward. And now, Daniel prompted, now I have hope. Real, tangible hope. My mom's healthy, Emma's thriving, the bills are manageable, the community is stronger. And I have you. She turned to look at him in the starlight. I have a future I actually want to be part of. Daniel kissed her gently. You gave that to yourself, Claire. You and your open heart and your refusal to let the world's hardness make you hard. We gave it to each other, she corrected. That's what I've learned. We can't do life alone. We need community, connection, people who see us and choose to stand with us. Is that the message you want to share? Daniel asked. Because this story is going to keep spreading. People are going to keep asking what the lesson is. Claire thought for a long moment. The lesson is simple. See people, really see them. Notice the struggle behind the smile, the weight they're carrying, the battles they're fighting silently. And when you see them, do something. It doesn't have to be grand or expensive. Sometimes it's just coffee and soup on a cold night. But that small act of recognition, of caring, it can change everything. She looked back up at the stars, thinking about all the people who'd been touched by the events set in motion on one freezing February night. We're all struggling in some way. We're all carrying burdens. But when we choose to carry them together, when we build communities based on compassion instead of isolation, those burdens become bearable. And sometimes they become beautiful. Daniel wrapped his arm around her, and they sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other through an act of kindness, now building a future based on the same principle that had brought them together. Love in action. Inside the house, Emma slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams 8-year-olds dream. In her own home across town, Patricia rested comfortably, cancer-free and hopeful about the years stretching ahead. Throughout Cedar Falls, and in 42 other towns across the Midwest, People were connecting, helping, seeing each other in ways they hadn't before. And on roads throughout America, veteran bikers rode through the night, carrying with them the message of the Roadside Angels Project. That kindness matters, that community heals, and that no one has to face their battles alone. The ripples from one waitress's compassion on one cold night continued to spread, touching lives in ways Claire would never fully know, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of love create the biggest waves of change. 1 year after that fateful winter night, the Route 34 diner had a new sign hanging above the door. The Roadside Angel Diner, where everyone matters. It had become a pilgrimage site of sorts, with travelers from across the country stopping by to meet Claire, to hear the story firsthand, to be inspired by the proof that goodness still existed. Claire and Daniel were married in June in a ceremony officiated by Jack Donovan, with over 1,000 bikers forming an honor guard. Emma served as flower girl, delighted by the attention and the rumble of so many motorcycles. Patricia, radiant in health, cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. The couple bought a small house on the edge of town with the help of the community fund, a place where Emma could have a yard and a dog, where they could build the life Claire had always dreamed of but never thought possible. Patricia became a volunteer coordinator for the Community Resource Center, using her own experience with cancer to help others navigate their medical journeys. She and Dr. Samantha Price became close friends, working together to improve access to cancer care for low-income families throughout Iowa. The Roadside Angels Project continued to expand, eventually reaching all 50 states. The model proved replicable and sustainable, with local communities taking ownership of their support networks while benefiting from the resources and expertise of the veteran motorcycle clubs. But the most significant change was the one that couldn't be measured in dollars or statistics. It was the shift in consciousness, the reminder that spread from person to person, community to community. We need each other. In a world that had become increasingly disconnected and isolated, the story of Claire Matthews and the Frozen Bikers became a beacon, proof that choosing compassion could change not just individual lives, but entire cultures. Years later, when asked about that night, Claire would always say the same thing. I didn't save those bikers. They saved me. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that help was possible, that community still existed. And then we saved each other, which is really what we're all meant to do. And the message continued to spread, carried on the rumble of motorcycle engines, shared in small-town diners and big city streets, whispered between neighbors and shouted from stages. A simple truth that had the power to transform the world, one act of kindness at a time. See each other, care for each other. We're all in this together. Did this story touch your heart in any way? If it did, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Share how this story made you feel, or tell us about a time when a small act of kindness made a big difference in your life. Your story might inspire someone else who needs to hear it today. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs a reminder that good people still exist, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring true stories of hope, community, and the power of human connection.